Hi, I'm Rayma.
And I'm Andrea.
And this is Mile High Murder. We are just slightly obsessed with true crime. We text each other when new missing persons cases are unfolding. We add each other to Facebook sleuth groups and definitely feel like we have solved the cases before anyone else. We aren't creepy, I promise.
I'm sorry. That was dumb.
It's fine, I'm just gonna laugh.
I'm ready, sorry. Randy Wilson was born on November 13th, 1957 in Logan, Utah, and was raised in Montana. He majored in science at Montana State University and went on to receive his master's degree in secondary education from Stewart University in Georgia. Randy began teaching in 1981 in Washington, and in 1984 he married his wife Linda, and they went on to have 5 sons.
Wow, 5 boys.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
The Wilsons traveled all over, with Randy teaching in California, Montana, Missouri, and in Micronesia.
Oh, wow.
Which is a cluster of 600 islands in the Pacific Ocean.
That's amazing.
It is. The Wilsons moved to Kiowa, Colorado in 2000. Kiowa is a municipality 40 miles northwest of Denver. Have you ever been there? It's a very small little town.
I've never been there. I've actually not heard of it.
Oh, yeah. I've driven through it once. In the 2010 census, the population amounted to 723 people.
Oh my gosh, it's tiny.
Very tiny. And it's only a total of 0.89 square miles.
Oh man.
It's small.
I couldn't do it.
So this is a very small town where I would guess that most everyone knew everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shortly after moving there, Randy and Linda began having marital problems and wound up filing for divorce in 2001.
Oh, that's sad.
Linda then moved out of state in 2002.
Okay. Did he have the boys?
I think he had I don't know how many of them he had. It seems like maybe they split up. I really couldn't find a lot of information about that. So Randy stayed in Kiowa and began teaching at Kiowa High School, where he taught math, science, computers, architecture, and computer science.
Oh, wow. Yeah. They needed him to do everything.
Right. And I think in a small town, at a small school, we went to a small school, and I think you do more,
Yeah.
To kind of make it stretch.
Yeah.
According to Randy's obituary and interviews on various news outlets, he was well loved by his family and friends. He was a devoted dad to his 5 boys, and he was very beloved by his students. So it would come as a complete shock to the small, tight-knit community when Randy's body was found on the side of the road on June 14th, 2010. Randy was found in his car just off of a county road with his hands bound behind his back, a plastic bag over his head, and a belt tightened around his neck.
Oh my gosh.
His cause of death was asphyxiation. Awful.
Ugh.
Now, I will say that there are many conflicting reports about whether Randy was in or out of the car when he was spotted. Okay. A lot of different articles say that 2 men found him inside his car, and then others say he was outside.
Okay.
So I can't verify that. There were no witnesses to the murder. His vehicle was spotted the following morning, Monday morning, by a motorist driving by. According to an article on Colorado Community Media, during his summer break from school, Randy had been visiting family in Wyoming and stopped in Bennett at a Conoco gas station on his way home. And the Conoco gas station is the last place that Randy was ever spotted.
Okay.
When police arrived on scene, they determined that Randy had been in the field for at least 12 hours before he was found.
Oh, man.
I know, which gave the Emmy the time of death. It put it about an hour and a half after he was seen at the gas station. Randy Wilson's memorial was held at Kiowa High School on June 19th and was heavily attended. People came from all over to pay their respects because everyone loved him. And it was such a big memorial that TV crews were actually camped outside of the school covering the story.
Oh.
It has to be so traumatic for a small town.
Yeah.
According to the Denver Post, evidence was sent to the CBI in August of that year with what investigators called, quote, a very good lead. However, when the DNA was tested, there was no match, and investigators were stumped. Yeah. According to CBS Denver, 10 months later, the police released information about the last time Randy was seen. They told the public that 2 people traveling to Aspen had stopped at the same Conoco gas station the same time Randy was there on June 14th. So the following morning, that's when they find Randy's body about 15 miles away from the gas station. Police asked the public to help them locate a woman named Krista Coppage and her ex-boyfriend, Stephen Nicholson. They were both from Tallahassee. So after that information was given to the media, reporters found her within minutes in California.
Yeah, they did. Good
Isn't
job,
that
reporters.
amazing? She was actually interviewed by CBS Denver and told reporters that she was of no help. She said she didn't know Randy and she didn't remember seeing him that night. With no eyewitnesses and no evidence pointing to anyone specific, the case went cold for 7 years.
No, man.
As a way to honor Randy, there's actually a cross at the crossroads where he was found, and it has his name engraved on it just as a memorial to him. And I would imagine, too, that in such a small town, you'd feel really uneasy.
Oh, yeah.
About the people you've lived with for years, and you don't know if it's someone who just happened to be passing through town or if it was somebody that you've like lived next door to your whole life.
There's just nothing to go off of.
Right. Seemingly out of the blue, an arrest was made on December 18th, 2017 in Randy's case. Daniel Pesh confessed to police that he had murdered Randy Wilson.
Oh, wow.
Pesh was arrested on charges of murder, resisting arrest, obstructing an officer, and attempting to escape. And adding to all of the mystery around Randy's death, when he was arrested, the judge signed a gag order making the arrest affidavit unavailable, which is usually public record.
Yeah. Do we know why?
Mm-mm.
Wow.
Because this case was so bizarre, the judge wanted to be sure that the information was protected, but that was...
Is it really just because this person came forward and like confessed to it and it had been years? And
I mean, I would think so.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to keep the integrity of the investigation.
And that makes sense.
So no one had any idea what the connection between Randy Wilson and Daniel Pesh was, but details start to emerge about Pesh having a very checkered past. His criminal record included multiple charges in Breckenridge for felony possession of ID documents belonging to multiple people, an illegal weapons possession, and speeding. He also had a bunch of traffic tickets in the Idaho Springs area around the same time that Randy was murdered.
Okay.
Shortly thereafter, the arrest affidavit was released to the public and details began to emerge that Pesh was the one who contacted police in the first, initially 6 months before his actual arrest.
Oh, wow.
He was the one who reached out to them.
That's just crazy.
Really odd. The affidavit detailed many interviews Pesh had with investigators over those 6 months, including text messages to an Elbert County officer a few days before his arrest, letting the officer know that he was driving out to Georgetown.
So is he just trying to put himself near the case? Because he's one of those...
It sounds like it. He was actually arrested 3 days later in a Walmart parking lot in Elizabeth. And from there, police then took Pesh to the Elbert County Jail where they didn't cuff him. And so when they took him out of the car, he ran. But they chased him down and then cuffed him. So that was where that extra charge of resisting arrest and then bolting.
Yeah.
When he arrived at the jail, he waived his Miranda rights and agreed to answer any questions investigators had for him.
This is super bizarre.
It is. Shortly after Pesh is charged with first-degree murder, more information begins to surface. It turns out that he had confessed multiple times to police that he had been the one to murder Randy. He even wrote confession letters. This is so strange. He wrote letters and left them at a mall in Littleton for people to just find.
And he signed them, his name was on them, or was it just a random
just a random letter?
He confessed and no one knew who it was tied to.
Right.
Wow.
The other thing is that he wrote his confession all over his windows in his apartment.
Okay.
So that to me sounds like
a lot of mental health
bingo
stuff going on. Wow.
So
I wonder if that's why it took them 6 months from the point he kind of contacted them to just try and decipher
I would imagine
what
trying
was
to figure out what the heck is happening. Yeah. So it seems like we've got our man. He's confessed. He clearly had details that led investigators to believe that he was in fact the murderer. 6 months of interviews and investigation, finally culminating in an arrest, would make you think that this is...
Yeah.
They've solved it. But there's one problem. The DNA and all the physical evidence did not match his confession.
What the heck?
I know. There was also this logbook that they found details that evidence that Pesh was actually halfway across the state, nowhere near Kiowa on June 14th.
What?
Yeah. There's also a lot of problems with his story, and his narrative really didn't match the facts of the case.
Okay. I do not understand false confessions at all.
It's very, no, I don't
Especially
either.
a situation like this where he seems to be going out of his way to
Yes.
let everyone know he did something he didn't.
My first guess is just that it's a mental health issue.
Yeah.
Then, in October 2015, Daniel Pesh recants.
Okay.
He tells his lawyers that he was suicidal at the time of his confessions. He says it was a result of his mental illness, drugs, stress, and a cry for attention.
Okay.
Which is basically what,
Yeah.
what we were saying. According to the Elbert County News, they reached out to his family members and learned his mom suffered from schizophrenia.
Oh, man.
And actually put Pesh up for adoption shortly after she gave birth to him. And then her parents, so his grandparents, went on to adopt him. He was described by friends who knew him as a happy guy, a fun person to be around, very straight-laced, and kind of a nerd. He got really good grades all throughout school. He enrolled at the University of Florida to study criminal justice.
Oh, wow.
Right? Hoping to eventually apply to law school. While he was at school, though, he began taking Adderall for ADD and then wound up dropping out of college in 2004. But when I read that about the schizophrenia, we know that starts to show up, that it can start to show up in your 20s.
Yeah.
And Pesh was 27 at the time of Randy's murder.
Oh, wow.
After bouncing around from place to place after leaving the University of Florida, Pesh moved to Colorado and began working at a ski resort, which is such a strange swing.
Oh, yeah, totally.
From Florida to the ski slopes. He would eventually go on to meet a woman named Kim. They began dating in 2015, and later she learned that she was pregnant. So in a jailhouse interview, Pesh tells reporters that he started to unravel in 2016 because Kim found out she was pregnant again. This led him to start drinking more, and it was becoming a routine thing every single day. In November that year, he was actually pulled over by police when someone called in an anonymous tip to the police that he was a drug dealer. When they searched his car, they found those stolen IDs that were from multiple people. But those were eventually dropped when a canine found no traces of drugs in the car. The spiral continued from there, according to his ex-girlfriend. Their second child was born in December 2016 and had a medical scare. So it was kind of like months of this.
Huge stress on him.
Right.
Which probably triggered him.
Yeah. A few months later, Pesh was fired from his job at a restaurant in Breckenridge.
Wow. Oh, my gosh.
Yep. He stopped sleeping and then would stay up all night drinking.
Oh, wow. No, these are all like the worst case scenarios.
Absolutely. In the middle of all of this, Kim found a long rambling letter on his computer detailing the murder of Randy Wilson.
That is like so random. I don't
It's
even
random,
know what I would.
Terrifying.
Oh, terrifying. I would freak out. I would kick him out right away.
I'd call the police.
Also be afraid to. Yeah.
Yes.
Totally. Call the police. But then.
Yes.
Also.
At this point, Kim is completely in fear of him. She's fearing for the safety of she and her daughters. And so she files for full custody with his adoptive grandparents in full support of her. Pesh,
So they must have seen signs of things all
I would
along the way.
imagine. I'm sure. Pesh said that this was the final blow and what sent him over the edge. He was placed in a 72-hour psychiatric hold, and when he was released, they gave him the pills, to maintain his mental health, but he would take them with alcohol. So he would come home and drink and take his pills, and that obviously only exacerbates the problem.
Yeah.
Plus, while he was in the facility, Kim took their daughters to her parents' house in Louisiana. So he's saying, I came home, I'm, out of this holding cell, essentially. My family's gone. And then the place is empty. And on the door, there's an eviction notice. Because he'd been actually writing checks and they were bouncing. So he was, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And it was at this time that Pesh started contacting the Elbert County police with his confessions.
This is such a strange story.
It is very strange. At his arraignment in 2018, Pesh pleaded guilty to the murder of Randy Wilson. As the investigation by the prosecutors began, there was a lot of doubt surrounding Pesh's initial confession. So then on December 3rd, 2018, the prosecution asked that the charges be dismissed due to a false confession.
That's It's crazy that they are the ones that were like,
Isn't
can you
it?
just dismiss this?
Right. And the request was granted by the judge. Fox News 31 said that the judge agreed that despite a confession, there was no DNA, no motive, no physical evidence, and nothing to even put Pesh in the same vicinity as Randy Wilson on the day of the murder. Prosecutors did, however, ask that the judge ensure Pesh get proper mental health treatment because of his history of mental illness, which I think is fantastic. That they were like, he needs help.
Yeah, hopefully they were able to do that.
Although the murder charge was dropped, Pesh was charged with attempted escaping when he was fleeing from the car.
Yeah.
And was sentenced to 3 years probation. At his sentencing, Pesh apologized to the Elbert County officers for what he put them through. But that frustrates me. Like, imagine what Randy's family and friends were going through.
Well, even that small town.
I know, totally.
Everybody.
And now we're still left with no answers and no leads as to who murdered Randy Wilson in Kiowa 10 years ago.
Thanks for joining us every Wednesday for a new case, guys. If you are a fan of Mile High Murder, consider subscribing and writing a review and sharing with your friends. You can also follow us on Instagram at Mile High Murder Podcast or search for our discussion group on Facebook. We're always searching for Colorado cases to cover. If you have a case you're dying for us to share, send us an email at milehighmurderpodcast@gmail.com.